Hello and welcome to Extraordinary Woman in Tech Diamond Interviews. I'm really excited to spotlight Priya Udeshi. She's from New York and she's one of our amazing diamond mentors. Hi, Priya. How are you?
Hi, Yuli. Doing so well. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm excited to talk more about you and your story. So if you can give us a little bit about background, how your career shaped and where you are today.
Sure. So first and foremost, thank you for the opportunity to be here. Like I've said to you before, I'm super amazed at the platform and the community that you've built, and just grateful to be a part of such an important mission. So a little bit about me: I work in the space of IT strategy and transformation. So have always kind of worked under the umbrella of an enterprise technology CIO type of function. Started my career in PMO style leadership, so kind of grew through the ranks of project, program, portfolio management, and now working at MongoDB as the chief of staff to our CIO, as well as leading our ITPMO.
Amazing. It's great to see the shift, from execution strategy and transformation. I wanted to ask you about your early experience. What really most shaped the way you lead today, and how do you feel as a leader today? What are the qualities that you have?
Yeah, in terms of an early experience, I would say, I started officially in tech as a business systems analyst, turned into IT project program, and then, portfolio leadership, like I said. And I always say I empathize deeply with people in this role because it's like in our DNA to want to pick up a ball that you see being dropped, even if you weren't the one to drop it. It is in our DNA to want to solve other people's problems for them, just in the spirit of moving broader delivery towards its goals. And, in terms of like the early experience that sort of shaped the leader I am today, early on, I was the person that said yes to everything, right? I worked pretty hard. I put in, the hours. I did, kind of had that hustle culture. And I did get rewarded for it. I spent almost 11 years in financial services at a bank. And I started as a junior analyst there. And I left, 10 plus years later, leading, as the VP of the EPMO there and driving their IT transformation. Early on, when I was at the bank, I was still an individual contributor. And I was working on some pretty large scale, tech initiatives, and was learning that skill of influencing without authority. And it was around that time that my boss at the time asked me to step in and lead the PMO, right? So it was really more of just someone had left, the person in seat had left the role and they needed someone to fill in. And, I was, a strong candidate at the time. So they said, oh, come in and lead the PMO. But by the way, you still have to run these huge initiatives as well, while also, learning how to be a people manager, a cost center owner, a department manager, all of which was very new to me. So I would say that experience specifically, happened early on. It did change everything. Suddenly it felt like the problems were too big and interconnected for just one person to solve through effort alone. I couldn't just work harder. I really had to think differently. And so that's when I would say I pivoted my entire approach in systems thinking that still show up today, being at the intersection of strategy, execution, and transformation. I had to design a system, right? Like an operating model with the right cadences, the right governance, the right way of surfacing decisions that would produce good outcomes, even when I wasn't the one personally driving every single work stream. And, it kind of, I would say, was the moment that I really realized too, my job isn't just to execute. My job is to actually design how the execution happens. And so I would say, the person, from being the person who delivers, who, follows the process and the policies put in front of me, to actually being the person who designs those systems that deliver, that shaped everything, every role I've taken, every transformation that I've led. Every team that I've built, I always do come back to that same question: is what is going to make this work at scale, sustainably, and as efficiently and effectively as possible? I've obviously been through a lot of different industries. I started in financial services. I work in high growth tech today, completely different industries, different risk profiles, growth scales, but quite ironically, the same problems that, technology functions are trying to solve. Disruptive emerging tech that creates new, governance challenges. I've heard, the cloud governance to SaaS governance, and now we hear AI governance. So like that word has sort of followed me through my career. And, I am a process person. Don't get me wrong. I do think it's important, but I've seen too many cases where organizations try to solve a problem with an old framework that isn't fit for purpose. So again, for me, I try to anchor on that same core discipline. How do I design the execution system that's going to connect the strategy to the outcomes in the most efficient way?
That's great. You're sharing your secret, what really shaped you as a leader. And I'm sure design system is different for every leader. Yeah, to really figure out what are your strengths, how can you delegate more, right? And as I understand design system, it consists of people, right? And also some of the automation and things that you can do to spread your leadership through this team.
Absolutely. It's the people, process, and technology.
And now today, you're chief of staff to the CIO at MongoDB, which is amazing. It sounds like you had to also shift, right, from delivery execution to executive influence. So what really helped you to be there, and what are the key elements to be a chief of staff and shape the different way that you work today?
I would say that shift happened actually more in stages, but I can pinpoint for me when it clicked. For the first several years of my career, I measured value. I measured my own value first by what I delivered, right? I'm, coming from the world of PMO and program, project and program management. Did the program land on time? Did we hit the milestones? Did I close the open risks? I was pretty good at that. I built my entire reputation around it. And quite frankly, I would say, IT organizations as a whole, and this was one of the things I observed, not just where I work, but even vendor partners and other, leaders in the space that I would speak to. This is how, value was measured. It was measured in that way based on these, pretty activity-based outputs. I remember, in my goal plan, this is when I worked at the bank, many years ago, there would be language based on like, if Priya delivers this project within budget by this date, this is the performance rating. If it gets delivered a month earlier, here's a higher rating. And we have, a very rigorous PMO playbook, ton of projects that I would say followed that process, followed the policy, defined success within those kind of traditional PMO measures, on time, under budget, within scope. But the general perception of IT didn't match actually what the success metrics were telling us on paper. When I was working at the bank, I was asked to join an official transformation team. It was part of, how do we transform the way IT is not only perceived by our business, but actually, able to accelerate the decisions made by, our stakeholders across the org. And when we did our stakeholder interviews, across the organization, and to define that sort of current state assessment of IT, we would hear things like, IT doesn't drive value. There's a ton of red tape to get things delivered. I may as well go out and buy my own tech to build my own delivery function. And, the net result of those kind of, perceptions is the symptoms that I've seen play out pretty much at every organization since. It's shadow IT, right? It's SaaS sprawl, right? Like people are going out and just buying. I can go out and just buy a tool to do what I needed to do. I don't have to have it run through this kind of traditional enterprise technology process. And that leads to just disparate data, integrations that are very complex and a very incohesive tech ecosystem. So, my job leading that transformation was not to only just transform what we delivered and how, but to also influence the senior leaders, right, on the what, the how, the, why this is important, what's in it for you, and to really showcase that the outcomes enabled as, and the decisions that we can accelerate as a result of doing, what we were doing through course of the transformation. So for me, I think the shift was realizing that executive influence isn't earned by being the best executor in the room, right? It's earned by being the person who can create clarity for those decision makers. I'll tell you, executives, don't need someone to tell them that a project is 73% complete. And, someone who's been in the world of, project management and has seen probably thousands of status reports in my career, I can't tell you how many times I've seen that type of bullet show up on an executive status report. What they need is someone to tell them, here are the 3 trade-offs that you need to make this quarter. Here's the data behind each one of them. And here's the recommendation, the team's recommendation, my recommendation on how best to unblock this particular decision that's driving towards an outcome. And I think that's a completely different skill, right? It's not about knowing more. It's about translating what you do know into the decisions that leadership needs to make. And that is what I see now, even in my role as chief of staff, as the biggest sort of pivot that, we have to have that relentless focus on outcomes. I needed to stop, I had to almost learn how to stop presenting information and start enabling decisions.
Amazing. I feel that there's so much a compliment that you bring to the team with all the PMO skills that you had, and also how to really read the room and spotlight the leaders, right? It's fantastic. Let's talk a little bit about you, high performing woman. Often you carry organizational pressure and personal expectations. I know you also have a family. So tell me a little bit about how do you balance this and without burning out, but still working on sustainable career. It's a question that everybody wants to know, ask. So I would love to hear from you.
Yes, I will be honest. I had this wrong before I got it right. And, it's still not perfectly balanced all the time. And that's okay. Early on, in my career, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, I operated like every initiative in my life was a must do, right? Not just with career, but with family, with health, with relationships, with learning, with mentoring, all top priority all the time. And, when I was younger, I would say I was able to sustain that for a while because, I do feel like I thrive in working, in high pressure environments. And it was before I had children. And, I'm just someone that wants to give my best to anything and everything that I do. But over time, more of these variables get added to your plate. And now, especially in this era that we're in where, everyone's waking up to hundreds of emails and Slack messages and WhatsApp messages. And, just it's really, there's sprawl of just management of the system, and sustaining isn't thriving, right? Like I got to a point where I was running my own portfolio, call it my life portfolio, with no prioritization framework, which to your point is ironic given, that's exactly what I do, what I help organizations fix. And so just on a personal level, I will say, I have 2 young daughters who are my world. They are 5 and 7 right now. So, pretty young still. And so for the most part of my career as a senior leader, I've been raising a young family while also, evolving myself as a leader. And, so I realized pretty early, as many moms of young children, I'm sure, do realize that, you have to have a system, right? You cannot do it all the time. And, I'm so fortunate that, my partner and I, we've been able to develop a system together where we don't feel like we are sacrificing our family time for our careers or our careers for our family. But there is this harmony, right, that, we've been able to develop that I think is super important to sustainability. And, for me, again, that shift happened when I started applying the same thinking to my own life that I would apply to a technology portfolio. I use a simple framework now to prioritize things that are actually going to bring value to me or my family's life. So again, it's I have certain non-negotiables, things that I protect no matter what. My health, I make sure to, stay active. And that is part of my daily routine. Core family relationships and sleep, which is, underrated, but super, super important. These are non-discretionary. And if I feel that if I let those erode, everything else falls apart. I also have growth goals, places where I'm actively investing right now, whether that's a specific career goal, a skill that I'm building, a relationship that I'm deepening, right, for personal or professional. And these I allocate almost a certain percentage of my time that, these get very focused, intentional energy, but I do limit how many of them are active at once. And I prioritize them based on, whatever the needs of my life portfolio are at the time. And then I have, transformational goals as well, whether they're personal or professional. So I think, I mentioned outcome-driven leadership. It's exactly that, right? It's the continuous, relentless prioritization of every task, every meeting, every deliverable, every email I either respond to or intentionally choose not to respond to, because, that's all of it is it's grounded in a very intentional outcome. And I'm not just actioning on something for the sake of, crossing it off the to-do list, which personally as a, type A, sort of mindset, I used to thrive on that. I used to be the person who felt so accomplished when every email in my inbox was read and addressed. And I'm sure I'm not the only one to say, in today's world, that's just literally not possible anymore. So I feel that the discipline now is not in crossing every single to-do list off your to-do item off your list. It's the discipline really is staying in control of actually what's not on that list, right? There are things that matter to me that are deliberately in what I call maintenance mode, not because they don't matter, but because, I've learned that trying to transform everything simultaneously is actually how you burn out. And a healthy, portfolio, whether it's, an IT or a technology portfolio or a life portfolio, is going to require deliberate trade-offs, and making a trade-off is not a bad thing. It's actually a very, very good thing. And so I would just, I would say one more thing is the sustainable leadership. When I think of sustainable leadership, that to me requires designing an operating rhythm, right? Not just your goals, but also being very intentional about, like, I'm very intentional about how my weeks are structured. When do I do deep work? When do I take meetings? When am I available and when I'm not, right? If I have to shut my laptop to take my kids to their after school activities, that's the priority. And if that means I have to not answer, Slacks or emails during that time, I'm very intentional and deliberate about that. And that structure is what creates that sustainability for me. And I feel that if you don't have that, you're just reacting to, whatever is the loudest at the time.
That's so great. I think there's another episode we should write about your personal and kind of a balanced design system that you strive in and, balance. My question on that note, you said that there's something you're working on transformational for yourself, because you already accomplished but you keep learning, keep trying to be somewhere and next level. What is it, something that personally that you're trying to, learn now as you're so successful already?
The transformational goals for me, I would say right now, expanding my my network and, where I can influence and where I can help. I would say this particular platform, that's why I'm just so thankful for it, because it's giving me an opportunity to learn from other women, as well as, to pay it forward a little bit. And I've seen that, I think we all, I've been in working for about, 15, almost 20 years. And, you kind of see this pattern play out where, women can be very exceptional doers and executors, but they struggle to gain that visibility at the next level, at the executive level. I'm also learning it, how to really take and shape, use my strengths to, to elevate, into whatever my next set of career goals are. And I think that's the, from a personal growth standpoint, that's where I'm spending my time.
If we take that into the next question, is how do you really now try to gain that voice, that confidence on the leadership level, and not kind of putting yourself in a place where people will feel a little threatened that, you have too strong of a voice or opinion? It's a really quite balance that people are trying to get, but any advice on that?
Yeah, I would say, and I will take this question for women specifically, because this is the platform, and, having obviously that vantage point, I've seen, somewhat of a pattern play out that unfortunately has happened, I would say more times than not, especially with women. I'll see it, and this is, either people that I've connected with that have shared their own personal stories, what I've observed in the workplace, or even people that I've managed, as part of my teams. And, there's typically a person, a leader, if it's a woman, who, is the person that everyone depends on, right? And this kind of goes back to the concept of being an exceptional executor, but not struggling to gain that visibility to move to the next level. This is the person that makes everything happen, right? Especially in the space of program managers, kind of back to the example of PMs, it's in our DNA to want to pick up the ball, we see being dropped. It's the person that, catches a risk that nobody else saw. It's the person that fixes the broken process so that the team can, ship on time. She is the reason, the glue that is sort of keeping the engine or keeping the, the vehicle on the road and on track. And, what's the reward? Like more of the same. Right? Give more of the broken programs to this initiative or to this individual. Give more of the things that are on fire mode to this person, because we know that they can do it, right? Oh, we couldn't do it without her. But does that actually translate into the promotion? Maybe, maybe not, right? Maybe to a certain point in your career, it can get you to a certain point, but that, I feel like that has a ceiling. And I'll be fully, intellectually honest here. This is a place where I'm also learning and growing. I've been that person. I've led organizations that were collectively that person. And I'm mentoring, a lot of women in that space right now. And so I've thought a lot about what separates those who rise with those who stay indispensable but unseen. And, my conclusion now is it's not talent, it's not work ethic, but it's messaging and it's narrative. Mm-hmm. And it's being the person that can be in charge of your own personal brand and your own personal story. The leaders who rise or land the job that they want to land know how to translate their own operational excellence into what I call strategic language. right? There's a real difference between saying I manage 12, back to the outputs versus outcomes. I manage 12 projects and we deliver them on time, right? Versus saying I redesigned our portfolio model, which enabled leadership to redirect, X million dollars towards high priority AI investments, right? It's the same work, but a completely different story. The first one says, I can execute and I'm really good at and I'm a reliable executor. The second says, I drive strategic outcomes. And so, I feel like that language is super important. And the thing is, nobody's going to rewrite that narrative for you. I mean, you may get AI to help you with it today, but your manager is not going to do it for you. HR is not going to do it for you. You really have to tell your own story in language that leadership uses to make decisions. And I think that feels uncomfortable. It can feel like self-promotion. And, for me, I try to reframe it. It's about making impact visible so that leadership has the data they need to invest in you. And if they can't see your value, they can't invest in it, right? That's not a character flaw or a competency or talent flaw. That's a visibility gap. And just like any gap, you can, again, back to the systems thinking, you can design a system to close it. And I would say in practice for, one of the things I'm practicing is, think about like how you surface your own wins. Think about, not just the tasks that you completed, but the outcomes you enabled as a result of the work that you did. That framing and that discipline alone is going to change how you're perceived.
Yeah, fantastic. I love it. And now I want to go back to a younger generation of girls. And, every woman in EWIT Academy who aspires to be leader like you, what piece of advice would you give them? I know that there's definitely lots of ropes, maybe different areas to focus on, but maybe one area that when you mentor young generation, what do you tell them about starting in the right path for leadership?
Yeah, it's a great question. One I wish I asked myself more intentionally when I was younger, but I say now to pretty much whether you're just starting out in your career or you're middle of your career and trying to figure out which path do you want to go into, always stay in the driver's seat, right? Mm-hmm. Design your career with intention. Most people, especially high performers, almost build their careers reactively, right? Like early on in my career, I will be the first to say I did a little bit of that, which is okay, like to grow and expand your, kind of what opportunities are out there and your understanding of those. But it's inherent to just, take the next role that's offered, right? Like we'll say yes to the project that needs us. We'll solve the problem that's on fire today, kind of tying back to what we were just talking about. And honestly, that approach, again, it can take you surprisingly far because competence it compounds. And for many years, like I said, I did the same thing. I took opportunities that were presented to me because I wanted growth, not just vertical growth, but that horizontal growth. But that does have a ceiling, right? So at some point you have to shift from reacting to just what's in front of you to intentionally designing, the career and the trajectory that you want that's going to accelerate you forward. And I mean that literally, like, apply that systems thinking to your own career and always be in the driver's seat. And I think the way to do this is, I kind of think about three things. First, what outcomes are you optimizing for, right? Is it just title and compensation, right? Or something bigger than that, right? Those things matter, but what is the impact that you want to have? What do you want to be known for? And design towards that. Second, what operating rhythm works for your life, right? Enterprise scale leadership, which is, what I'm in, it's a long game. It's not a 2-year sprint, right? So to get to a point where, you have credibility and you want to be able to, kind of design additional systems around that, be intentional. Think of, is that the path that, you want to go? And if your current rhythm isn't sustainable, redesign it before it redesigns you, because, everything is moving at 100 miles an hour. And if you don't try to keep up with that, and again, stay in the driver's seat and stay in control of the systems around your life, they're going to just, kind of consume you, and you're going to react and, kind of have that feeling of your head's just barely above water at any moment in time. And I would, kind of back to the narrative building. What narrative are you building, right? I feel like your career story is your best asset. It's how people understand your value, your trajectory, and your potential. And, you are the only person who can shape that story. So just don't leave it to chance. Just, I would say, again, design the career with intention and always stay in the driver's seat of your own career.
Yeah, it sounds so easy, but it's so hard, right, for the young girls to do that. But I love that you give advice to actually look back and ask yourself, is it something that I want to do? Is it
Yeah.
something that will progress me? Because sometimes we're just so happy and excited to get this first opportunity. But
Yeah.
I love that you have to do the thinking. And the last question I have for you is, what have you noticed for the young rising women? What is really holding them back? Is it confidence, or what can they break through to really get into their rhythm of like, I am worth it and this is what I want to accomplish?
It sounds maybe a little, like it's kind of manifestation-y, but I think it's important. Like you can every day start saying, I can do this. Again, staying in the driver's seat is not just, thinking about what is the role that you want, but saying to yourself, you can do it. This was not a career podcast. This was a life podcast that I heard. And, it was actually around, there was manifestation kind of nuggets thrown in there. And someone said, the whole saying, I'll believe it when I see it is so fundamentally backwards. Like you need to believe it for you to see it, right? Like you need to believe you are in the role, demonstrate that you can operate in the role that you want, that you want to become. And that's how that confidence builds. Whether it's, you're just starting off in your career or, you're a seasoned leader, you have to truly, lead with that conviction and that confidence. Say it to yourself every day, even if you feel like, oh, maybe you don't believe it right now. The more you say it, the more you're going to believe it, right? The more you see it right in front of you, the more you're going to believe it. So I think that it can be overwhelming, especially starting early on in your career, especially now. There's just a ton of information coming at us in so many different places. And this is where, again, shaping your thinking and shaping your framing to stay in control of what influences, both personal and professional, you want in your life that's going to help you accelerate, to where you want to go in your career.
You're so amazing, Priya. It's like, I wish I had you as a mentor. And it's like, I really, it's great that we have now opportunity to help these girls and shape up their confidence, all the little stories they have in their head, and have someone like you guiding them through it. It's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I know there's so many more we can talk about, and we will. I think we should talk about your design systems. We will go into some very, very deep work with confidence and being in a driver's seat. But I just want to thank you for joining me today, and many more to come.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you again. This was so great. And yes, we will have lots more of these. I'm excited.